Uzdrodzview, dickheads. Welcome to Humble Choice Review. In Russia, game reviews are simple. If it runs, good. If it does not, also good. Suffering builds character. Battery life on Steam Deck, 4 hours? Ha! In Russia, light goes out after 1. You play by candle, while babushka yells because generator runs.
Oi! What are you doing on there?
Oh, Boże.
Get out of here! Go, get!
Those Russians, always going places where they're not invited. Alright, you know the deal. I've tested the bundle using my big black shiny deck, so you don't have to. Also worth mentioning, the way I now capture gameplay footage caps my frame rate at 60 frames, so any games that can go higher than this won't. Not that it matters though, because frame rate issues are only noticeable when it starts dropping below 40, so don't get in the comments saying, mine is bigger than yours. I've been told that enough times in my life already. And speaking of comments, I'll announce the winner of last month's Steam Key giveaway. Want one of the games showing on screen? Let me know in the comments, and the best comment will score the key they want in next month's video. It's as easy as a KGB raid. Quick, unexpected, and someone else always pays the price. Okay, without further ado, let's get started.
What is this stuff? It smells the same as the toilet.
WWE 2K25 is essentially a soap opera. Dramatic entrances, questionable plots, and more sweaty body slams than anyone asked for. On the Steam Deck, it runs relatively well. The frame rate can technically go up to 60, but in actual matches with a crowd, it hovers around 30, like a wrestler who's taken a few too many hits to the head, but still gets back up for more. Your battery, on the other hand, will only last a measly 2.5 hours before your deck taps out. Controls are surprisingly accessible. No 50-button combos to remember, which means even I could chain moves together without googling something basic like how do I Irish whip. However, the inputs are sometimes way too finicky, so things like trying to lean a table against the corner of a ring are like threading a needle with a big sweaty man screaming in your ear. The text is also criminally tiny on the deck screen, probably one of the worst offenders I've seen to date. And as for the tutorial, strap in, because it takes over an hour just to learn how to play. That's longer than many actual WWE matches. The highlight though is the MyRai single player campaign, which does a decent job of tying matches together with a bit of narrative flair. But let's be honest, the real fun, as with every wrestling game since the 90s, is the weapons. Nothing beats smacking your opponent with a chair or whatever random object you can find under the ring. Unfortunately, once the novelty wears off, the gameplay gets repetitive faster than John Cena merch sells out. You'll have some fun at first, but unless you're a die-hard wrestling fan, WWE 2K25 will probably be a short-term fling on your deck before you tag in the next game in your library. You might be staring at the screen right now thinking, hey, where's the gameplay footage? Well, if you're a deck owner and have spent more than 5 minutes on Reddit, you'll know the ugly truth. Bungie hates Linux with the same passion I hate most visual novels. God, I hate visual novels. Bungie's anti-cheat system doesn't just accidentally trip over Linux users. It's set up to deliberately flag you as a cheater and swing the ban hammer. That's right, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Bungie basically looked at the deck and said, something that isn't Windows, not on your life. So unless you want to permanently lose your access to Destiny 2 and join the why did I think that was a good idea club, don't even try launching it. The only thing you'll unlock is regret. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. I've still got plenty more ways to show off my deck, and trust me, it's big, black, and always ready for some hands-on action. Every once in a while, a game comes along that feels like it was made just to show off what video games can do. The Plucky Squire is one of those games. On the deck, it runs like a dream, locked at 60 frames per second, 3 hours of battery life, crisp text, and smooth controls. And playing it on the deck won't get you permabanned, which is always a plus. What sets this game apart is variety. One moment you're running around in a top-down Zelda-style adventure, the next you're hopping across 2D platforms, also like another Zelda adventure, and then suddenly you're in 3D environments and solving puzzles where you shift words around in sentences, or even change pages in the storybook. It's the kind of constant reinvention that keeps you grinning, because you never know what you're going to get next. Think storybook come to life, but the attention span of a kid after 3 cans of Red Bull. It's all delivered with more charm than a conman at a Lonely Hearts convention. The art is adorable, the storybook narration is well done, and the cast of quirky characters feels like they've stepped right out of a Saturday morning cartoon. There are even cheeky nods to classics like Punch-Out that make you go, "Oh, I see what you did there." At 9 hours long, it's just enough to keep you engaged while never overstaying its welcome, and it's one of the most delightful experiences you can have with your deck. If you're looking for something that's equal parts charm and creativity, the Plucky Squire absolutely delivers. If you've ever wished Heroes of Might and Magic and Fire Emblem would hook up and have a very slow, very complicated baby, congratulations! That baby is SpellForce Conquest of Eo. On the deck, performance isn't bad, but it isn't great either. It can hit 60 frames per second, but more often than not, it drops into the mid-40s, especially once the screen gets busy. Battery life is about 2.5 hours, making it thirstier than a dwarf in a tavern. The controls are about what you'd expect from trying to jam a 4X strategy game onto a handheld. A little finicky, a little awkward, but functional once you get used to it. The real problem is the tutorial, which feels like it was written by someone who really didn't trust you to figure anything out on your own. I was still slogging through tutorial chapters after an hour, and by then, I'd already learned everything the fights were trying to teach me. At some point, it starts to feel less like instruction and more like punishment. That said, if you're a fan of deep tactical combat, the game does have a lot to offer. Tons of unit variety, plenty of depth in the combat mechanics, and enough systems to sink your teeth into if you're the kind of person who lives for 4X games. But if you're not a strategy diehard, this one's going to feel like a slow slog. Add in the tiny text on the deck screen, and casual players are probably going to bounce faster than a goblin getting crit by a fireball. For the right audience though, Conquest of Eo is a rewarding grind. You just have to know what you're signing up for. Guybrush Threepwood is back, and so is the wacky charm of the Monkey Island series. Return to Monkey Island delivers the same razor-sharp writing and ridiculous humor that made the originals cult classics. At one point, I listened to a character drone on about the finer details of anchors for 3 straight minutes before I finally skipped the dialogue.
The current bow-shaped design is actually...
It's that kind of absurdity that this series thrives on, and it hasn't lost a step. On the Steam Deck, this game is as comfortable a fit as a peg leg in a splintered floorboard. Battery life stretches a generous 5 hours, the text is perfectly legible, and the controls are shockingly well refined for a point-and-click adventure mapped to a controller. It feels natural, never clunky, and never makes you pine for a mouse and keyboard. The whole package just works, which is something you don't get to say often when it comes to the deck. Gameplay-wise, you'll either love or hate the puzzles. Thankfully, there's now a casual mode that simplifies the more convoluted logic puzzles. A very welcome addition given the series' long history of combine chicken with pulley to make nonsense happen. Still, even in casual mode, the loop of needs this item, can't get it, need another item first, can get repetitive fast. If you're the kind of player who immediately reaches for a walkthrough, beware. Relying on one for this game is likely to suck the fun right out, and by then, you're better off just watching a Let's Play. The game is charming, funny, and a perfect fit for handheld play. Whether you're a nostalgic fan of the originals, or just looking for a witty story-driven break between heavier games, this one's worth boarding ship for. Eastern Exorcist is a 2D Souls-like dressed up in Chinese folklore, and while it's got some slick moments, it doesn't actually reinvent the wheel. On the deck though, it's a smooth ride. Locked 60 frames per second, about 5.5 hours of battery life, and controls that feel tight. That alone already puts it ahead of half the Souls-like wannabes out there. The story and setting are intriguing. Demons, corruption, and plenty of mystical flair. But after a while, the repetition sets in. Enemies technically look different, but they attack in such similar ways you'd think they were all trained at the same evil kung fu academy. Environments do change, but thanks to a dull color palette, it never really feels like you've moved on. It's like someone gave you a whole box of crayons, and you only used the grey ones. Still, as far as Souls-like platformers go, this one's on the accessible side. The parry feels forgiving, the combat has a nice flow to it without demanding a blood sacrifice to master the basics, though the tutorial does seem to repeat the same things over and over again. With a runtime of around 8 hours, it's short enough that the lack of variety won't completely wear out its welcome. Eastern Exorcist won't haunt your deck forever, but it's a solid enough exorcism to kill an evening or two. It's time to announce the winner of last month's Steam Key giveaway. There were so many great comments, it was tough to pick just one, but in the end, I had to go with Brendan Shepherd. Never have I seen someone wait so patiently, quietly hoping for a game that, let's be honest, most people couldn't care less about. So congrats Brendan, make sure to send a chat message on Reddit to the user Decusheadus to claim your key. And to everyone else who missed out, don't worry, your time will come. Probably. Maybe. I mean, who knows? If Mario Kart was run by orcs, dipped in oil, and set on fire, you'd get Warhammer 40k Speed Freaks. On paper, it's a chaotic blend of team racing, frag matches, and even a capture the flag style mode. On deck though, let's just say it's less speed and more freak out. Performance is a hot mess. Even on low settings, it usually hovers between 30 and 40 frames per second, but it loves to nosedive into single digits at the most random times, just to remind you who's really in charge. Battery life is short at 2.5 hours, which is fitting, because that's about how long you'll want to keep playing before the performance issues drive you mad. And don't even get me started on the text size. Unless you're part mech boy with bionic eyes, you'll be squinting the whole time. The bigger tragedy though is the player base. When I hopped in, I found exactly one public game with 3 players. To be fair, maybe I wasn't on at peak global orc hours, but still, it doesn't inspire confidence. And that's the real shame here, because underneath the stuttering framerate and tumbleweed servers is a genuinely fun idea. The mix of racing, vehicular combat, and objectives has potential. It's just hard to experience it properly when you've got fewer people online than a LAN party in 2003. Speed Freaks in a Humble Choice bundle feels like an artifact. A fun concept that's already running out of road. It's a taste of what could have been, but unless the servers suddenly come back to life, this one's more likely to end up in your library backlog than on the winner's podium. Sometimes the simplest ideas are the best. Grapple Dog doesn't need a 10-page lore dump or a grimdark conspiracy to sell itself. You're a dog with a grappling hook. That's it. And it turns out that's more than enough to deliver one of the most pleasant surprises in this month's bundle. On deck, the game runs flawlessly. Locked 60 frames per second, buttery smooth controls, and a battery life that stretches to a massive 8 hours, which, in deck terms, is basically immortality. This thing will outlast your commute, your couch session, and maybe even your patience when you tell yourself just one more level for the 10th time. It's as perfect a fit for handheld play as you'll find. Gameplay wise, this is platforming bliss. Levels are tight, expertly designed, and slick enough to keep you in that flow state where you forget time exists. Inspirations from Sonic and Donkey Kong are clear, and the soundtrack even feels like a long-lost Sonic track. Unfortunately, it's the same long-lost Sonic track on repeat, and by hour 6, you'll be humming it in your sleep, whether you want to or not. Still, the charm never fades. Grapple Dog nails that sweet spot between accessible fun and challenging precision, rewarding creativity while staying breezy. It's fun, it's addictive, and it's got more heart than half the AAA titles in your library. It might not look like much on the surface, but once you play it, you'll be hooked. Literally. Which is why I'm giving it the Grower Not a Shower award. That's it for this month's bundle, but is it worth your cash or just plain trash? Before we get to that, you might as well like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because let's be honest, you've already spent 10 minutes watching footage of me play with my deck. You might as well go all in. So, what's my recommendation? Skip this bundle. Especially for deck-only gamers, but maybe even for PC gamers too. After last month's absolute whopper of a bundle, easily one of the best we've had in ages, I was feeling optimistic about where Humble was headed since the price hike. And then September rolled in to remind me that optimism, just like children, is the first step on the road to disappointment. If you want even more bundle banter, keep an eye out for the next episode of Humble Talk, hopefully dropping next week. That's where Stealthy Sharoan and I dive deeper into these games and usually wind up so far off topic you'd forget we were supposed to be talking about Humble Choice in the first place. See you next time, deckheads.
Himself on the wrong side of momentum. Miz has to devise a new plan here. Stomping down. This has to be it.